name is Lynn and I'm studying to be a BCBA. So let's just jump into what today's topic is. And today's topic is tracking hours. This, out of everyone I've ever talked to who has become a BCBA or is trying to be a BCBA has discussed, is probably the most frustrating part of becoming a BCBA. The most stressful part is taking the exam. The most frustrating part, recording your hours. So to become a BCBA, if you are applying to become one, which it means you are applying to take the exam on or after January 1st of 2022, which if you're watching this video, it's very likely you must have supervised independent field work, and 5% of that supervised independent field work must be meetings with a supervisor. It's a little difficult to explain, so let me parse it apart. You need 2,000 hours of supervised independent field work. What supervised independent field work means is it's independent field work, so it's me working with a client one-on-one, and I am applying programs that I know of that my supervisor has provided to me. Does my supervisor need to be there? No. That's the main one, even though it's called supervised independent field work. And then your supervised hours have to make up 5% of that. So if you work 100 hours a month, because it goes by month, then you need to have at least 5 hours of supervision with a supervisor directly supervising you. This can be in the form of a meeting, so there's a lot of different company meetings that we have to go to, which will have BCBAs present, and that counts as your supervised hours. This can be in the form of your actual supervisor, who is a BCBA, overlooking you as you are participating in your client's session, or it can be just your own side meeting with that supervisor to discuss training, to go through things. When you start your master's program, you do need to actually set aside a supervisor and meet with them at least on a weekly basis. There are 2 types of hours that they want of that 2,000 hours. So it's not just 5% has to be with a supervisor present. You also need to discuss and disperse the types of activities you're doing. So there are 2 types of activities. There's restricted and unrestricted. Unrestricted would be graphing, taking notes, discussions with supervisors, or basically any time that you are discussing things with the stakeholders in a session. So stakeholders being like parents, grandparents, the other people involved who are not directly the client. Restricted activity is when you are running any sort of program with the client. Those are called restricted hours. So if I'm running very specific items that my supervisor has given me, like, oh, ask that kid, like, to choose the color yellow in a field of 3, which means 3 items presented. He has to choose a yellow item. When I'm directly doing that with the kid, that is restricted hours. When I'm talking to my supervisor and she's telling me this is what you need to run, ask him to pick out yellow out of a field of 3, that's unrestricted hours. So as you can imagine, in every session, a certain percentage is definitely restricted hours because I'm working one-on-one with the kid, and then there's another certain percentage that is unrestricted because I have to take notes, I am maintaining data, and I am making sure that everything is being run smoothly, so I'm running other things that are not necessarily directly relevant to that child. So I'm like touching base with the parents, and I'm getting information about like, oh, like the other day they did this and we discussed antecedent strategies or something like that with the stakeholder, and that's not directly working with the client. So it's up to us to determine and decipher what percentage of each session is. That being said, when you track it, FIT provides a tracker, a monthly tracker online that you are supposed to fill out. So they let you download it. It goes straight into an Excel spreadsheet. You fill out the hours, you track everything. I have yet to fully figure out my tracker because every time I try to download it, there's some sort of technological difficulty with it. But I do have a physical tracker via my organizer notebook that I bought from ABA Technologies. I also co-track it with my supervisor, who I have been assigned. We'll jump into that whole topic at a later date about having a contract with a supervisor and working with a supervisor as soon as you start your master's. But for right now, just understand that you have restricted hours, working with the kid, unrestricted hours, taking the notes, taking down the data, doing all the logistical behind the scenes work. That's separated. The other topic of hours that you need to disperse is what is being supervised, once again, and what is independent. So I can be performing restricted hours with my client, but if my supervisor is there, that is then supervised hours. It doesn't care if it's restricted or non-restricted. So you need to keep track of that too. If my supervisor is not there, then it is independent hours. So that's the biggest difference between that. So once again, The example being per month, if I work 100 hours with a kid, 5 of those hours have to have a supervisor present in some way, shape, or form, be it through telehealth, which is virtual, or physical if they come into the house. Now, given that we're in a pandemic, most of them are going to be virtual. So you have to track your independent and supervised, right? So that's one aspect of your hours. And then you must track your restricted and unrestricted. And that's part of the 2,000 hours of the overall gathering of your fieldwork section for your BCBA. Once again, the 3 components to get your BCBA is fieldwork, coursework, and your degree. Well, your degree comes with your coursework, assuming you do everything correctly. Your fieldwork must be tracked with the restricted and unrestricted, and the supervised and independent hours. It is such a tedious task that the BCBA provides several checklists. So here is the pre-experience checklist, which is required, which helps let you know what you need to start tracking. And then from there, they have the fieldwork checklist and tip sheet, which moves on to like, oh, this is what you're getting, like this is what you're going to get into. So now, once you have everything, we're going to put it together. And then finally, a monthly tracker and checklist for you so that you can keep track of everything and keep yourself accountable. And once again, you have your online tracker that you do. So once you finish your pre-experience checklist and then your fieldwork checklist and tip sheet, once you've figured all that out, then you get your online tracker. You fill out a monthly experience verification form, which is signed off by your supervisor at the end of every month. So that's why my supervisor has the same access to my tracker as I do, so that she can make sure I'm being held accountable. But I also have to keep my personal organizer. I track the unrestricted, restricted, and I keep a month to date and year to date counter running on that as well. Because once again, at the end of your coursework, hopefully you've enough to try and sit for the BCBA exam. The sooner you can sit for the BCBA exam after graduating with your coursework, the better off your chances are usually to pass. Not to mention, there's also a limit on how long it takes you to get those 2,000 hours. It may seem daunting, but currently I work 36 hours a week, and they only allow you to accrue 30 a week of independent hours. So independent and supervised combined, right? So 6 of my hours I work every week are not counted towards my field work section for my BCBA accrual. That being said, that's another limitation you need to keep track. I've already had to edit my own because I forgot that I'm limited to 30 per week because I always exceed it. Even when kids cancel, it just goes down to like maybe 32 hours a week. And then once again, the monthly has to be signed and then submitted, or for your sake, at the very least, put in a place where both you and your supervisor have easy access to it. So if you do get audited, they can go back and see, oh, okay, your supervisor signed off here. Do you have the tracker for that month? Let's see what that is like. So it's a bit of a headache, but realistically, it's just tedious. You need to keep track of each one individually. That's the sanest way I can describe it. I have broken down every single day, and this is where my physical field tracker kind of fails because I needed to handwrite my own module inside daily to track, did I receive supervision hours that day, supervised hours that day, week to date, how many do I have that day, and then independent hours, how many did I work that day, week to date, how many did I do that day, and then also restricted and unrestricted. After discussing with my supervisor, we agreed a certain percentage per every session should be considered unrestricted, because every R.B.T. realistically should be taking the first and last 15 minutes of every session to do notes. That is all unrestricted. So there's at least a half an hour per session that is purely unrestricted hours. If I am engaging with the parents and helping them modify their kids' behaviors a bit more, and I'm doing a little bit more parent training, then yes, I can increase the amount of unrestricted hours I have performed during that time. So I need to take care of that daily. I need to track it daily because you can't remember all that by the end of the week, which is kind of what the organizer assumes, is that you'll just track all the hours for the week and then add it all at the very end. And it's not very realistic. It's a little annoying having to add all those individual daily trackers to each day, but it will make your life so much easier at the end of the month when you do have to fill out your monthly verification form, and then you go online and you fill out that tracker and you have everything done. And once again, it's really dependent on your supervisor as well. Your supervisor has to sign off on the monthly experience verification form, and at the end of the 2,000 hours and supervision hours, your end experience verification form. There is a final verification form that they need to sign saying, yes, I approve all of the monthlies that I signed. And I'm sorry, I think I got off track earlier, but you are only allowed 5 years to accrue these hours. For me, hopefully it will take about 2 years, assuming that my case count stays the same-ish, but that's not true for everyone. You must accrue at least 10 hours per week, up to 30 per week. And that's all hours, restricted, unrestricted, supervised, independent. That encompasses all of them. And so per month, it means you must accrue at least 40, but no more than 130 or 120. So it's very dependent, right, on how many hours you work, and also if you can keep track of all of them. So obviously I work what's considered full-time, and I'm taking my master's, and I've also set aside time to meet with my supervisor every week, because that's what you are supposed to do when you are assigned, when you start your master's courses. You can start tracking your hours the day you start taking master's courses for FIT. I cannot speak for every place, but it is definitely important that you recognize, at least for FIT, you can start tracking it immediately. You have to make sure you have your contract, which once again, I'll cover that in a different video on how to find a supervisor and how you track supervisor hours. But for hours tracking, just make sure that you keep your online tracker, have your organizational tracker, have your monthly tracker, and then recognize the difference between the restricted and unrestricted, and then separately track your supervised and independent. So that is all encompassed within your accrual to become a BCBA. In our next video, we'll probably start talking about, we'll touch base on the supervision. So getting assigned a supervisor, having a contract, what that entails, what is expected from the B.C.B.A. when they have that contract on file, and also from your work, if you're doing a clinical setting or if you're doing a fieldwork setting like I am. Unfortunately, clinical setting is a bit more university-esque, where it is very much in person at a university and your coursework is married to your fieldwork. That is not how most people achieve their BCBA, but that is a route you can take. The one I'm taking is the more general one, which is I work for an ABA company and I'm taking my own independent courses from a qualifying university. So yeah, so that being said, we'll cover all the supervision needs, requirements, and nitty-gritty in the next video.